What's up everybody, my name's Andy and welcome to Kit Guru. So earlier this year, we reviewed Razer's first gaming Ultrabook with a tiny 13.3-inch display, which did have integrated graphics. However, Razer may have outdone themselves this time because we're checking out the Razer Blade Stealth 13, which I now think deserves the gaming Ultrabook title because it has a GeForce GTX 1650 Ti Max-Q graphics card inside. I'm sure many of you are regulars here on the channel, but if you're not, if you're new, then we do some really in-depth tech reviews and more. If you'd like to support us, then it would mean a lot if you hit the subscribe button. Before we dive into this review, remember that this is an Ultrabook. It's a tiny, super thin laptop and not a full-sized powerhouse laptop. So let's get straight down to business. What are the specs and how many limbs do you need to exchange to own one? Well, despite how small this little package is, our model comes in at a rather hefty £1,899.99 here in the UK. Now for that, you're getting a quad-core 10th gen Intel i7 1065 G7 CPU with hyper-threading with a base clock of 1.3 GHz up to 3.9 GHz with turbo at 25 watts. We finally get that dedicated graphics card, an Nvidia GeForce GTX 1650 Ti with 4 GB of GDDR6 VRAM, which is the Max-Q variant, so it can be squeezed into this tiny little laptop. We have only one drive here, a 512 GB PCIe NVMe M.2 SSD, which is twice the size of the previous Stealth 13 that we reviewed earlier this year. RAM wise, you get 16 GB at 3733 MHz, fixed in dual channel, 120 Hz 13.3-inch Full HD 1920 by 1080p display, a 53.1 watt-hour battery, Wi-Fi 6, Bluetooth 5.1, a selection of ports and more, but we'll cover those soon. I still can't get over just how small this laptop is. It's absolutely tiny, coming in at 1.4 kilograms and only 15 millimeters tall. It certainly looks impressive and expensive as well. We have a high-grade aluminium CNC'd unibody frame in stealthy black. There's no sharp edges in sight and there's nice corners too. On the top we have Razer's triple-headed snake logo etched in. On the front we have a small lip to open the lid. No ports on the back as this is where the hinge is. On the left side we have a USB-C 3.2 Gen 2 power port, a USB-A 3.1 and a combo audio port too. On the right side, we have another USB-A 3.1 and a Thunderbolt 3 port that can also be used for charging and much more. The Thunderbolt 3 port can be used with Razer's external graphics card exclosures for extra performance as well as external monitors. On the base, we have two rubber feet that raise the Ultrabook up for added airflow. Towards the back, we have mesh intake vents with added fans to aid with cooling. The overall aesthetics are crisp, understated, and very premium, and personally, I'm a huge fan of the design here. It doesn't feel like a toy, and instead you're reassured that this is going to last quite some time because the build quality is excellent. My one gripe here? Well, sadly, the matte black finish is a fingerprint magnet. Opening up the laptop feels great. We have a full hinge system that spans the entire back edge and it's super smooth. Despite the screen being absolutely paper thin at just 3.5 millimeters thick, it feels sturdy and rigid. It doesn't feel like you're going to snap the screen in half when opening it, and that was my biggest concern here. Around the lid, we have a tiny little rubber guard to protect it for when the laptop is shut, but it's so small that you almost don't notice it, and I'm glad to see some protection from scratches or wear over time. We do have a forehead and chin around the screen. Towards the top of the panel, we have our microphone, as well as a 720p webcam with Windows Hello support. Towards the bottom of the panel, we have a very tastefully applied Razer logo in the center, but you'd be forgiven for not noticing it. Continuing on the stealthy theme, the keyboard is a matte black with white font, but don't worry, it is also powered by Razer Chroma. We have a single zone RGB that can be controlled in the software. The RGB looks good and gets fairly bright at maximum settings. Now, the first thing that I noticed about the new keyboard layout is the extended shift key. Little details like this really mean a lot to me, especially since the keyboard is so small to start with, and this really aids with gaming. We also have half-height arrow keys too, despite the lack of a number pad. In the top right, we have our power button, and across the function keys, we have media keys as well, RGB brightness and more. The keyboard has anti-ghosting and a 63-gram click force, whereas the power button has a click force of 120 grams to prevent accidental key presses. Typing on this tiny board was strange for me at first, I must admit, and I did accidentally press some keys, but after a bit of time I did get used to it, but it did take a few days. Finally, despite the tiny size of this Ultrabook, we have a huge glass touchpad, and it's hands down the best I've ever felt on any laptop. It feels super smooth, it's super accurate, and it also has Microsoft Precision support. Pressing down towards the front left activates the left click, and pressing on the right activates the right click. Aesthetically, they've definitely gone for a more stylized design here instead of an overly aggressive, gaming feel like many other brands do, and I think it looks awesome. Display-wise, there is a 4K touch panel available, but we got sent the 120Hz matte 1080p display instead, and I'm kinda glad about that. At 13.3 inches, the 1080p looks excellent, and honestly, unless you're getting this for Photoshop, then opt for the cheaper 1080p model. The resolution is brilliant, it's super sharp, super crisp, and colors look absolutely stunning because this screen has 100% sRGB coverage. Razer market this as the first 13-inch laptop with a 120Hz display, and I certainly wasn't expecting it because it's so small. This screen choice made watching movies and playing games, no matter the time of the day, a truly great experience, and despite the tiny screen, it's super immersive once you get into it as well. Speakers can be found on either side of the keyboard, and they're probably the biggest letdown here. Up to 50% volume, they sound really good, and are actually pretty loud at around 72 decibels, but once you go past 50%, they quickly become tinny and also start to distort due to the vibration of the rest of the chassis. At 100%, it's most noticeable, and it also hits around the 85 decibel mark. Overall, they do fine towards the lower volumes though, and I didn't find that I used them above 50% anyway. Obviously, using headphones would be the best experience, but it's still nice to have good audio up to a point. So the power brick is surprisingly pretty small in comparison to other laptops. There's a nice LED light on one end so that you know it's on. The lead itself is super thick and braided. It does come kinked and is relatively stiff overall, but the end is a USB-C connector, and I like the fact that you can charge the laptop via either of the USB-C ports on either the left or the right side. So depending whether you're left or right-handed and using a mouse, this is actually really handy. Once plugged in, it does stick right out though, which is slightly unfortunate. There's no 90-degree bend here to get it out of the way, but it's good that you can use it on either side. Before we move on to our tests and results, the Razer Blade Stealth 13 does come pre-installed with Razer Synapse software. Here you can enable gaming mode that disables certain keys, choose to use media keys instead of function keys, and vice versa. There's a lighting tab for keyboard RGB options, quick effects, there's a brightness tab for when you're on battery and when plugged in, as well as when to turn them off, and finally we have performance tab. Here you can set your screen's refresh rate and choose between 3 performance modes: balanced, power saver, and gaming. You even get the choice between auto fan speed or manual mode, so you can set it yourself. Let's check out some of our test results. I haven't used charts from previous laptop review videos here, as it's simply not fair to compare them to this tiny little Ultrabook. We put the CPU through its paces with Cinebench R15, where it scored a modest 741 points. In Cinebench R20, it hit 1655. We ran the BMW render in Blender, and it did take a little while at 553.8 seconds to complete. Bearing in mind this is an Ultrabook and it has a base of 1.3 GHz up to 3.9 GHz with turbo at 25 watts. Now I thought that was pretty good considering. CPU temperatures idled at around 45 degrees C. During a long Cinebench R20 run, it hit fairly high at 79. And whilst gaming, it was pretty much the same at 78. This is fairly hot, but again, this is a tiny bit of kit in a metal chassis, so I did think it did pretty well. PC Mark X Pro scores came in at an overall score of 4,448. Essentials scored 8,567, productivity reached 7,471, and digital content creation hit 3,734. Now I know it's hard to judge these numbers as we're not comparing them with other laptops due to, this being a smaller laptop and the other ones that we've reviewed being full-size laptops. It's just not fair, but these scores are pretty great considering it's an Ultrabook. GPU wise, we put our GTX1650 Ti Max-Q to work running 3D Mark Firestrike. This gave us an overall score of 7,519, a graphics score of 8,472, and a physics score of 9,925. 3D Mark Time Spy gave us an overall score of 3,213, a graphics score of 3,136, and a CPU score of 3,738, which is fairly low scores, but again, this is a Max-Q 1650 Ti Ultrabook. So what do these scores really mean in real world situations? Well, let's check out some frames per second scores. I tried to test various games rather than targeting ones that I knew would run great, as I wanted to see if it was possible to play demanding games if you really wanted to. So I ran Shadow of the Tomb Raider for that very reason. I used a high preset at 1080p with DirectX 12s just to see if it could handle it. We got a minimum of 34 FPS and an average of 45. Now I was actually impressed by this score. Yes, we have a 120Hz screen, so you do want high FPS, but if you spent some time making a custom graphics preset, you could get the game running super smooth at a solid FPS on a tiny, super portable Ultrabook, and that is impressive. Next, we gave the opposite end a try. We got Counter-Strike Go, and that gave us a minimum FPS of 67 and an average of 98 on the highest 1080p settings. Very playable, and remember, if you knocked down a few settings, you could definitely get over that 100 FPS. Resident Evil 2 Remake on the recommended settings, but bumping texture quality up to 2 GB gave us a minimum FPS of 50 and an average of 65. Now the game looked and played great at this, and 60 FPS was, easy to play at. Finally, we tested everyone's favourite, Call of Duty Warzone. And again, I pushed it up to high just to see what we'd get, and we got a minimum of 30 and an average of 41. Now it is fairly low, but I'm seeing potential here. Drop a few more settings and you could definitely get over 60 FPS as well. Even at 41, I found it playable, only noticing a few dips, and to be fair, that was probably our terrible Wi-Fi that caused them. GPU temps idled at 44 degrees, stress testing saw it go up to 65, and gaming got the hottest at 77. Now nothing I'd get too worried about considering how small the Stealth is. Power consumption when plugged in saw an idle draw of only 15 watts, whereas benchmarking saw it soar up to 65.5 watts, and gaming went up to 86 watts. Now our last but not least test was battery performance. We tested this with PC Mark X Pro and saw 67 minutes, so just over an hour under the gaming test. The idle test came in at 487 minutes, which was well over 8 hours, but do keep in mind that real world results will be better. Personally, whilst gaming intensively, I saw around 90 minutes or more, depending on the game that I was playing, which is very impressive, again, for the size of this laptop. I keep saying it, but it's tiny. The Razer Blade Stealth 13 is now worth the previous title of the first gaming Ultrabook, and I do think it's capable now. Now, I would say this is a complementary laptop. So if you've already got a gaming system, but also happen to be someone that travels a lot or maybe does more business than play, then this is probably for you. Either screen you opt for has full sRGB coverage and the colors look excellent. So if you do need a tiny Photoshop power and want to drop into Warzone on your lunchtime, then this could be your best friend. Yes, it is very pricey in my opinion, but you are getting a very solid and absolutely tiny bit of kit here that really does stand tall now. If you're purely after a gaming beast, then look elsewhere, get a big chunky desktop replacement for the same price and you'll love it. But that's not what the Stealth 13 is trying to be. It's trying to be the stealthiest one in the room, and personally, I think it's achieved that. So what do you guys think of the Razer Blade 13? Do you think it's too small, or do you think it could be a really good complementary laptop? Let us know down in the comments. Now, if you've liked this video, hit that thumbs up. It would mean so much for us if you hit the subscribe button. You can check out our merchandise down below and check out KitGuru.net daily for tech news. I've been Andy, this is KitGuru, and I'll see you in the next one, so thank you for watching.